Hello, thank you for coming. I have the pleasure of talking with Corine de BILBAO, who's president of Microsoft France, Charles GORINTIN, who's president of Alain, co-founder of Alain and CEO of Alain, Jean-Paul MAZOYER, CEO of GIECB. Hello. Cédric Battier, who's at Accenture, yes. And Loïc SOUBEYRAND, who is the CEO of Swile, or the CEO. We're going to be talking about AI, and I had the honor of co-presiding the Commission on Artificial Intelligence. And we put forward our report to the President of the Republic with Anne Bouvreau, who was the co-president. So this is the report that we handed in mid-March. Hopefully this report will be implemented, and Anne Bouvreau organizes the next AI summit that will take place in Paris in February 2025. And she's in charge of organizing that, which is something making her proud. So I will be handing over the floor to these different speakers. Now, the revolution of artificial intelligence is something that cannot be avoided, and all sectors, it affects all sectors of activity, the economy, the organization of labor, public services, information, and cultural sectors. Now, there are always pessimists, big pessimists, and pessimists who are not as big. Now, the big pessimist, I've got a colleague, I like to pull his leg. He's a prof at the IET, and he's very pessimistic. He thinks that AI, artificial intelligence, will not lead to very much growth, and it will destroy jobs massively. Now, I believe that from a technological point of view, the revolution of artificial intelligence has an awful lot of growth potential, and that it also has the potential to create jobs. But everything will depend on the policies and institutions that we set up to go with that. And that's why it's important to vote on Sunday. But coming back to growth, why do I think that artificial intelligence, and this is what we say in the report, so what I'm saying is based on the report, why do we think that AI can stimulate growth? Well, because in fact, artificial intelligence allows us to automate tasks, not just when it comes to producing goods and services or replacing human capital with machines. It also makes it possible to automate tasks for the production of ideas, okay? So, for example, artificial intelligence makes it possible to solve complex problems. It facilitates learning. It's self-improving. So it's not only going to improve the production of goods and services, it's also going to improve the production of new ideas, innovation. Perhaps I think with AI, it's going to be even easier to have ideas, unlike what some people say. So studies have been carried out. There was one study by Eric Bryn-Johnson, my friend, who's an economist at Stanford, on a company which belongs to the Fortune 500, one of the biggest American companies, providing SMEs in America with advice about the adoption of software. Now, they've realized, in fact, that access of the employees to ChatGPT and AI considerably increases the productivity of workers. Now, that's on a micro level. Though that's just one company, you might say. What's happening at macro level? And there are two ways of looking at the macroeconomic impact of AI when it comes to growth. The first way is to extrapolate and to say, okay, we've had the revolution of electricity in the 1920s. We've had the revolution of information technologies at the end of the 20th century. And every time these revolutions have led to one additional growth point for 10 years. So if we base what we're thinking on that, we should be at the stage where we can have that growth point for the next 10 years. But that is one method. Another method is to say, okay, I've said that artificial intelligence automates tasks. So this increases productivity of work. Now, my friend tried to look at things from that approach, and he found that 0.07 points a year was possible. But if we do the same thing as my friend, this gives us 0.708 of growth for 10 additional years. And that's not taking into account the fact that artificial intelligence automates not just the production of goods and services, but also the production of ideas. And that means that when I say 0.7 or 1 additional growth point per year, I'm not reflecting reality. Technologically, AI can improve growth. Now, this brings me to the problem of institutions. The big problem is the lack of competition. When we had the revolution in the United States, growth went up between 1995 and 2005, but then it started to go down because what happened was with the revolution of information technologies, there was the introduction of GAFAMs. They carried growth, Microsoft, Amazon, Google, etc. They carried growth, and I know that it's you carried growth, you led growth, but you made lots of mergers and acquisitions, you grew and grew and grew, and then you inhibited the entrance of new market players, not all, but some of them. So to begin with, at the start of the 2000s in the United States, there was a decline of the emergence of new companies. So the innovators of yesterday acted as a barrier to new players. So for artificial intelligence, the problem is that in the upstream segments, when we talk about the value chain for AI, and Benoît Duré would be able to explain this to you, there are very few companies in the cloud and all of that. These are segments that are not totally competitive. And so the idea is that AI has a lot of potential to provide growth, but the barrier might be because there is a competitive policy that is not favorable enough. So there are people who say that we've got to regulate mergers and acquisitions. There are people who say open source software is very important. Access to data is very important. The Digital Market Act has to be extended to the whole value chain for AI, notably the cloud. So competition is very important if we want to really draw on the growth potential. I don't want to talk too long because you've got AI and employment. Yes, and can you bear me a little bit longer? No, employment. So there is the fear that AI is a risk, an existential risk. AI is making us all redundant. You know that each job involves a certain number of tasks, and AI is replacing a certain number of tasks, as I've said. There are jobs for which all tasks are going to be replaced by AI, and in this case, jobs are threatened. But in this report, we calculate it's not more than 5 to 10% of jobs that will be threatened. Otherwise, jobs will have to be restructured, rejigged. That will save times for boring tasks and allow for more time for interesting tasks. So AI, we know that for a sample of companies, AI will increase jobs for these companies because they will become more productive, more competitive, and they will have a bigger market for the products, and they will be employing more people. It's the productivity effect that is better than the idea of replacing man by the machine. So what about people who are losing their jobs? We need an educational system, we need vocational training, and we need a good social security system, like in Denmark. We've got unemployment here, but it's not as good as the flexi security in Denmark. So we can generate growth and employment, but we need the right institutions and the right policies. That is my position. Now I'm going to hand over the floor to Corine.
Des potentiels de l'IA. Désolé.
So, sorry, I was a bit long. So I think we're all getting very tired. Hello, everyone. There's several topics that were touched upon, so we're going to try to address them one after the other. I am among the techno-optimists, but the techno-realists, if I can say that this way, in the sense that the way that we look at the benefits of AI is about looking at the user case and what it brings to society. You've said it, all the technological revolutions have brought on disruptions, job losses, changes in the skills. We talked about electricity, we could talk about the printing industry. There was a revolution as well, and that has destroyed some jobs at the time, but created also a whole new economy. The people who make paper, who make ink, and that promoted commerce and Renaissance and the Century of Light, etc. So that happens through over a number of years. The difference is where we're living now is it's happening very fast on a very short time span. There are 5 million users in ChatGPT, 2 months later 100 million. So the speed of the change is very important. And what is really important is revolution, is it happened at the same time in different geographies. So the topic of this technological revolution, we say, is it going to be beneficial or not? The important is how is it going to spread? The capacity of adopting the technology fast or not, and is the value is going to be shared? If we can do both things at the same time, it's positive. So what I'd like to answer without criticizing, on the concentration of value, the reality today is that if we look at the regenerative AI technology, there are 3 layers of infrastructures, and it's true that the amounts of capital are so big that today it is concentrated on a number of actors who are mostly Americans or Chinese. And Europe would like to think that they could replicate these infrastructures, but that would require a lot of money. If we look at the economies and the economic system that it creates, there's all the different language models like OpenAI, but there's also other language models that have been created by this technology, and there's the applicative layer for companies that will help them to be more productive in their processes, to create value with the clients, to create innovation. We talk about 500 million of applications that we're going to be created by 2030. That's where the value is. So the big danger is to spread ourselves too thin in the way we spread capitals and what we want to aim, and to be too late on the adoption phase. But what remains today, and I'm sure 48% for companies of regenerative AI, and versus the US, 79%. So we're lagging behind, of course, and we need to work on concrete user cases, and encourage companies to look into it. And also the topic that you haven't mentioned that is in the report is skills. Skills is a very important topic because we realize that it's about education, it's about student skills, it's about retraining professionals who will see their job impacted, and we need to train again. And you mentioned it. So the real topic of focus must be there on circulating user cases of companies and get them all on board, because we realize today is the same divide that we had on other topics between the big groups that are going to go there anyway, and because they're global and they can afford it, and the small companies where the rate drops to 15% of adoption. So it's about competitiveness, sovereignty, because re-industrialize involves sovereignty. And I see it as an opportunity if we act pragmatically on the user cases and what we need to concentrate on. Maybe I spoke too much, but 2 other points that I'd like to make is beyond all that, if we place ourselves, if we look at the macroeconomic, there's some companies where energy transition, there's so many parameters and data and equations that the human capacity to fix them is not there. So it's also an opportunity to be able to work on that. I give you an example. For example, the wildfires in California with the regenerative AI, you can make a better prediction, and you can have a better positioning. You know exactly where to place the firemen, so they can intervene as quickly as possible. It goes the same way with all the weather forecasts. This is a domain that requires a lot of data, is health, and it could be very, very helpful for health, discovering new molecules, the capacity to treat diseases, major diseases. So on those topics, the example with the RNA vaccine, the fact that we were able to put it on the market very quickly. So I am an optimist at heart, but I am realistic at the same time, because we have to be pragmatic on what we need to do and what we should focus on. We've talked about data, and we want to facilitate the access to the health files. And we recommend that we don't need any more authorization to have access to the health data, because there are two fundamental input for AI is data and the calculation speed. So we need to have access to data very quickly. And that the CNIL becomes an innovator and gives authorization. It's going in that direction. So data and calculation power. And I think, do you think we need to work on the calculation power in France? Yes, of course. And that's why it's important to have made some investments, and we're making investment. But if you want to talk about the quantum subject and all the quantic, it's going to be on those fields that are huge in terms of data treatment. And there are needs for research, for investment, and we need to helping research in France as well. Charles. Hello, thank you. Are you a pessimist or an optimist? This is the first question that we're going to ask you. What category put you in? It's an excellent question, and I consider myself as a methodical optimist, not a die-hard optimist who just doesn't really look at things closely. I look at things very closely and remain optimistic. And I will tell you why it's very important to be an optimist, because I have two hats. I am the co-founder of ALLEN. ALLEN is, we created in 2016. It's a company that is now insures 500,000 people in France. And also, I am also a co-founder, a non-operational founder of Mistral AI, which is a company that we created from scratch a little over a year ago to create a European champion of AI. And why did we create Mistral AI? It was to be able to support the innovation that we want to do within ALLEN. I have my own training in AI, etc., formal AI. I did that about 10 years ago. In 2022, I decided to stop everything that I was doing as the technical director of ALLEN to focus only on AI, because there was something coming up. It was regenerative AI. Because we really have to make the difference between the generative AI and the classical machine learning, that is discriminative AI that exists since the 60s, and the generative AI has managed to be on the forefront in 2022. And the strengths of generative AI is that it is possible to use AI even if you don't have 10 people in a team of engineers and data scientists to work on it. In fact, you can use AI as soon as you can write in a text field or to give instructions. We can use AI now with that. The barriers are getting lower and lower. So on the topic of what SMEs don't yet have AI, it's cultural, in my opinion. So I go back to ALLEN. We decided to transform the company with generative AI in 2022. We started to change everything, all the processes in the company. And what happened is we realized very quickly that we were using only one actor, which was OpenAI, to be able to provide us with generative AI. And what happened is we decided it was not possible to take this risk as a company to have an actor such as OpenAI that would basically take over the market. So we had to create something, an alternative, a European champion that would be based on open source, because open source is a chance for everyone to own the parameters of their own model and to own the model. So competition is important. Yes, competition is very important. Open source is very important because it creates an explosion of innovations if you have open source models. So that's why we created Mistral. And at ALLEN, we have some concrete cases, and that's why I really disagree with Teramoglu, is we have some concrete cases where we see that AI is saving us millions of euros in terms of productivity costs. I'm going to give you a couple of examples. The first one is at Allen, we received 1 million bills per year. People would take a picture of their bill at the doctor and send it to us, and we need to treat those bills, you know, very fast. And there were some people who would look at the bill and they would extract the name of the doctor, the price, and the date, and that would take them a few days, a few hours. And it was not a very fun job to extract information from a bill. So what we did is we replaced that by a huge language model, so we can then reimburse people in 1 minute, sorry. And after that, to save millions, and allowing people not to spend time on that. So productivity gains are huge. It means that all the people who do these jobs are not very interesting of extracting data. They can move on to jobs that are a little more interesting, where they're going to manage all those AIs. So it's much more interesting to do that and much more intellectually stimulating. So are you creating jobs or are you destroying jobs? What's happening is we have a better I repeat my questions. Are you creating jobs? Yes, we're creating jobs. So if you're not more productive, we can recruit more people because it's more sustainable to recruit the marginal people. So by improving the productivity, we increase the demand. So this is a productivity effect that is more important than the substitution effect. Statistically, out of our 9,000 companies in France, and you're in your own company. Jean-Paul, optimist or pessimist? Optimist, absolutely. I'm going to make Corine happy because I want to, as an introduction, I would like to quote Bill Gates, who says that in terms of technology, we have a tendency to overestimate the impact at 3 years and underestimate at 10 years. So we overestimate the speed and underestimate the impact. It's the same thing for the AI. It is going to modify fundamentally our behaviors, our ways of working in companies, as of our behaviors in our everyday life. But it may take a bit of time to get to such a revolution, and it's a real disruption. That's how we should take it. I consider that it's a strength. It's for transformation for companies. I work with Cap Bancaire and another major French banking group, but I think it's going to change things fundamentally. And we should take it as a real opportunity. The question is it going to create jobs? Is it going to replace employees? I think it will probably jeopardize the companies that will not adopt AI, and the employees will not be replaced by AI. They will be replaced by other employees who know how to use AI, and no matter what their hierarchical situation in the company, so including for managers. So it's going to become something absolutely indispensable in the way we're going to have to work tomorrow in our industry, particularly banking and finance. AI will generate or will amplify banking models. Today we can see that there's some digital banks that are trying to do as much as possible with technology, and we can imagine that tomorrow the technology is even going to amplify this trend even further. We have the models in France of banks that bet on the complementarity between the technology and AI and the human side on the other hand, with a belief that more AI for more humans. The question is behind it is who's going to make the choice? Am I using AI to decide and to address the client's needs to the end, or am I using it to help the woman or the man who works in the bank to have the best information possible so he can act as a manager, so we have to add on to that the carbon footprint, the environmental side of things, but that's part of what we have to do. I am fundamentally convinced that the model that will integrate AI and human responsibility is the model for the future in our industry. So it replaced a number of tasks, but it allows us to have more time to concentrate on other tasks. It's not only a question of time, it's a question of being more personal in your relationship, so to have all the elements to be able to exert your responsibility, your empathy, your emotion, to take a step back and everything. And that's why I would like to get to the third dimension, is how can we integrate both, and how can we make sure that we have staff, that is employees that are even more into the human relationship thanks to AI. This is not easy, so we'll have to invest as much in technology as we do in human support, because we'll have to change our recruitment criteria, our assessment criteria, our management criteria, because it's a big risk to see some employees that could protect themselves behind the answer provided by AI, not to exert their human responsibility. And that's the contrary that we want. We want them to be spending less time in the strictly analysis task, because that will be done by AI, but that they could exert more their responsibility and their human capacity. That's what we call the soft skills. How can we say that AI is going to enhance soft skills, or relationship with others, etc.? In the job, there's a lot of talk about soft skills now. This is what's going to happen at the condition that we are capable to put this forward and to advance our management styles and how to manage our employees. And this is the challenge. I haven't talked about so much about AI, but I've talked about all the human support around AI. Do you think it could be a way to promote social dialogue in the company? Some people say it's going to isolate people. Some people say it's going to promote social dialogue. Do you have a vision? No, I don't particularly have a vision on this particular topic. I think that everything that can be done to support AI-backed analysis is a good thing. Thank God AI will allow to have analysts that go faster than what humans can do. Machines, since the history of man, have been built to be more powerful than men. Otherwise, it's not useful. Well, Deep Blue would beat Kasparov at chess, you know. It was 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And then it was Google who beat the Go champion. It's not a big deal. Tomorrow, AI has a capacity of analysis that is faster than the capacity of a human. But you will never compete with a human emotion skill. What Raphael Enthoven said about the philosophy paper, and he made a difference between what AI can do and a human can do. You have to keep this in mind, and you have to really imagine how we can be more human thanks to AI. Thank you very much.
So I was going to tell you a bad joke. What about dissolution decisions? Do they have to be taken by AI or not? But I won't share that joke with you. Anyway, over to Cédric. So the challenge at this stage in the conference is to give a point of view without repeating everything that's been said up until now. So with respect to the question, and this is Accenture's point of view, being optimistic. We are resolute optimists. Optimists in the sense that there are lots of prerequisites, lots of things that have to be set up in order to help with the transformation in companies. Accenture is there to help big companies with their transformation and to help them to use new technologies in the best possible way. What we want today, well, there are three main messages with respect to AI. First of all, the potential of value creation for society and companies is unparalleled. Secondly, the match between construction and destruction is only just beginning. It's difficult to say how things will be. But we have some enlightenment points that I will share with you. And the third part is that globally, when it comes to prerequisites, AI can be its worst enemy if you don't have prerequisites, and it will not fulfill its promise. So going back to the first point, we performed a study on 30,000 tasks in companies across the world. And what we're saying is that 56% of tasks are going to be impacted by AI. So it's huge. So out of the 56%, half will be impacted by automation. Those tasks will disappear They will be automated. The other half of the 56%, so 30%, will be completed. So human beings, and this is what Jean-Paul was saying, human beings will be able to be supported by new technologies, AI, in order to take decisions, will work differently. So the impact is huge, 56%. What's interesting is when you look at the business case and you share it with companies, and it's about reinventing costs, it's between 9 and 25% of the cost structure of a company that's going to change because of AI. It's not going to go down, but it will change. And what's interesting is that what we're seeing specifically with this wave is that unlike digital technologies that impacted specific sides of business, here everybody will be impacted. The 56% that I was referring to is 38% of impact chemistry, and it's more for finance and banking. So all sectors of business will be impacted. Now, with respect to the digital revolution, all functions within a company will be impacted. So the legal department, R&D, operations, all functions will be concerned by the AI wave. I won't go back over what I said about the speed, about the fact that it's very easy to use, that these are just factors that mean that AI has a value proposition that's fantastic. Let me take an example to illustrate the materiality of this. A call center that we operated. So a call center, there are two aspects of the business case. The first aspect, how can AI reinvent the customer experience? Today, when you have a call center, the first thing, whatever the operator is that there's a waiting line. It's a robot that picks up the phone, and then you wait in line. So now, instead of waiting 3 minutes, it's 0 minutes. Now, the user experience is improved because of this. The resolution time is also improved. The responses are more specific, so the customer experience is much improved. The costs of operation are decreased by 56%. So we've got better value, and we've got an impact, a positive impact on cost. So it's not about destruction, because as the response is better targeted, it's also possible to provide better service. So the demand goes up, therefore. Yes. So this is just one example. I've got lots of examples. Let me give you a second example: software development. We might say that it's disastrous because AI is going to make sure that all departments will be lowering their staff numbers by 30–40%. No, there will be more development, in fact, and it's all of these things that have to be dealt with. Now, the second point of view that I would like to develop concerns destruction versus construction of jobs. Now, the match is taking place right now. There's an example that I like. Everybody forgets to say that the pocket light was killed by other things. But the first results are over time, and the match is even, if not tending towards more jobs. In 1999, there was a focus on banks and the impact on banks, and in 2011, 2012, things are going down. The initial promise was 300 million jobs being destroyed. So the match between creation and destruction has to be nuanced. There are different shades, and there will be more construction than destruction. Now, the last part, AI, when you talk about AI to people, the first reaction is that it works on its own. So everybody says, and this is what Jean-Paul was saying about the kinetics, the time, 3 years instead of 10 years, which is what Bill Gates was saying. But when you see a demo, you think that things will be done automatically. The transformation will happen on its own. But in fact, it takes more time than we imagine. If we take an example that's very amusing, again, in the software development field, if you give licenses that allow allow the software development to be improved, you can gain in terms of productivity by 30–40%. If you don't transform the company, your productivity gain will be 0, 1, 2%, but very close to 0, because there are different things. One, the use rate is not as high as that to begin with, and also the people using the software need to be helped. There are good users, bad users, so the transformation cannot be done all in one go. So I haven't taken up all the time, but first, the 3 messages are: this revolution is exceptional. It's exceptional because of the amplitude, because of the size, because of the promises, its speed, and the promises. So it's an industrial revolution that we mustn't mess up. The second point is the destruction-creation match. We know that things will be destroyed, but there will be many things created, and the match is in favor of creation. And the third point, be careful. AI can be its worst enemy if you don't have the kind of support, and that's where states and governments can help. You've got the right mix in terms of regulation and support and investment. So the state can play a role there. Yes, it's the state that can play a role. Do we need some kind of laws? We know that it's important. Investing in education, investing horizontal investments, research generally, flexi-security, all of that. We know about that. But do we need an industrial policy for AI? This is a question for all of you. On top of everything else, on top of the DARPA AI, do we need some kind of law for education? And these are real questions. That's a very good question. So from a corporate point of view, this is what I think. What we're seeing in companies is that there's no responsible AI logic that's defined upstream. If there's no architecture and platform defined for AI, if there's no logic for the human side of things, you rotate to jobs in the company. If you don't have all of that, if companies don't do all of that, then the promise will not be fulfilled. And that's the sense of my third answer. Loïc. Loïc, you're the last, but not the least. So pessimist. I think I'm the 6th optimist. So we're 2 days away from a dramatic election in France. It's going to be absolutely terrible. Everybody's depressed. It's the only session where everybody is going to go away cheerful and saying that, oh, life is good. It's very optimistic, this session. Yes, when you add your energy on top of the rest, well, yes, certainly everybody's going to be cheerful. Yes, so to be original and optimistic, but also realistic. I think we've used all of the different adjectives. Realistic is another adjective. I'm going to try not repeat everything. So there's a lot of fantasy, there's a lot of emotion connected with AI, there are emotions that are exacerbated, there's a lot of excitement for the pure optimist, and fears, crazy fears for the most pessimistic among us. So there's something that's obvious, and that is the speed of adoption of the technology. 18–24 months ago, there was nothing, literally. And yet, and this is what we're seeing the speed at which everything's being adopted. And a study came out recently that showed that 30% of employees today use generative AI on a day-to-day basis in their job. So it's a speed of adoption that's absolutely crazy. But in spite of that, the fears, the excitement, have they materialized? No, not at all. 30% of us use AI on a daily basis. Do we have the impression that everything's changed in our jobs? Has there been a massive creation of jobs linked to AI? No, not yet. So I think it's just to echo what was being said. So time requires time for things to be set up. And it's a bit like the flashlight, what you were saying. I don't believe what you said. Anyway, AI. I think we can be very optimistic. We should focus on what's best, not what's worst. And perhaps something that hasn't been said is that AI, notably, is going to help people. To have more multi-purpose jobs, versatile jobs. And this is a key to commitment and fulfillment. The world of work, and Gallup's studies show this, have shown that employees have never been so disengaged from their jobs. And if they're disengaged, it's because they are being subjected to their organizations and the bureaucratization and that's what creates burnout. And making them more versatile will reduce the coordination costs in the teams. And so we'll have the impression that there is an impact, that there is progress being made individually and collectively, and it means that the social climate will be much more positive and better for fulfillment, and it will help with individual performance and collective performance. So that's something that I really wanted to put out there on the table. So we were talking about productivity. You've got the jobs. Do you think that productivity is increasing thanks to AI? Is this something that you've felt, that you've seen in your company, that AI, that we're stimulating growth and productivity? Absolutely. Yes. How do you measure the growth in productivity? Well, here's a very concrete example. Our teams, our marketing and creative teams, since they've been using on a day-to-day basis AI without being ashamed or being afraid of being replaced, we've kept the same number of staff using AI, but we've been able to come up with twice as many operations and campaigns thanks to the increase in productivity. So that's very concrete, and I can guarantee that in-house nobody is afraid of losing their job because of artificial intelligence. And there's a kind of euphoria, how can we go stronger and how can we move faster for our customers? Again, who is asking for this? This comes back to the 30%. It's being asked for by the employees themselves. They themselves want to have a sense of a bigger impact. They want to produce more. There's a sense of pride that goes hand in hand with all of this, and it does the whole company good. So there's this fear of massive destruction of jobs. I really don't believe in it for 1 second. Let's take an example that may wake you up, shake you up. In call centers, we think immediately of call centers and how disastrous it's going to be. But first of all, we need to remember one thing, and that is attrition. The attrition rate for employees in call centers is close to 50%. So basically, but there are exceptions, but every 2 years, the whole staff is completely renewed. What are going to be the reflexes of the call center companies? Well, they're not going to massively take away everybody's jobs because the turnover is such that if there's a drop in demand, and it will take time for this to happen, then they simply need to adjust the number of people recruited rather than manage people who have lost their jobs. There won't be anything brutal about that. There won't be a brutal removal of jobs. And these companies are still seeing a future in a positive way, even those companies, because they're saying, this is a means to be more productive, a means of increasing our margins, etc., etc. And I would like to remind you of one last thing. We've got to be careful. Perhaps some jobs will go down. They will maybe not disappear entirely, but there will be less of a demand for them. This concerns some professions. Let me remind you that there are still very many sectors that are suffering, that are under a lot of pressure, that are not able to recruit, and perhaps that the employees who can go and work in a call center, maybe they will be able to go and work in other industries where, people are looking for people. So the school teaches you to learn. So having a good school system, it gives you a certain amount of flexibility. Now, there's a very interesting map drawn up by Anton Berger, who classifies the different types of jobs according to whether they're more or less exposed to AI vertically and according to the share of tasks replaced by AI. Now, the most exposed are accountants, telesales. There are many tasks that are likely to be replaced, and then there are others So, for example, cleaning technicians. So, in all, the professions that are going to be replaced represents less than 10% of jobs. Yes, there's that. And there's something else that I wanted to mention, and the Brynjolfsson study. They didn't just look at the impact on the volume of jobs, but also on inequalities. So the Philippine employees have access to ChatGPT. Are they the most productive or the least productive that benefit the most? Well, it was the least productive who benefited most from this. In their study, generative AI reduces inequalities, and that increases job satisfaction and customer satisfaction. Have you experimented with the effect on inequality? For example, does it reduce, the gap between having more or less experience? What about measuring happiness at work? Yeah. What about the quantity of jobs reflecting happiness or inequality? Do you have something that measures that? Perhaps Corine, do you have something like that? We carried out a study like this. It's an index, basically, on the relationship of 30,000 employees to their work. There's a subject with respect to well-being at work, the ability to be creative and have free time. For the first time, there's been productivity from white-collar workers. There wasn't much productivity from white-collar workers in the past, but there's also been a lot of overload there because there are fewer admin assistants. So there's the freeing up of this contribution of well-being, and generative AI can channel that research, summarizing information. So well-being at work is a good subject, and this is something that's being adopted by companies. And there's the question of attractiveness as well. Well-being is important to attract people. And there's something else that's important. You talked a bit about it, the subject of, rehumanizing relations. For example, if we take the doctors that we were talking about, there's NABLA, allowing doctors to automate all of the reports, all the admin work. Yes, there's an overload for doctors too. Yes, they're overloaded. And what about emergency ward workers as well? This is going to rehumanize the relationship with others. Now, a last point with respect to the divide, we talk about the social divide, and that's what we're seeing definitely at the moment. We've talked a lot about the digital divide, those who have access to digital technology or not. With body language, you can talk a different language. You can be illiterate, but because it's your natural language, you can have interaction with a public department. The subject of adoption is a real good topic. It's about reducing the social divide by providing access without having all the knowledge of the processes, the language, etc., to have access to state departments. That's a good topic. You were talking about industrial policies. How can public departments be exemplary? Yes. How can they set an example? But also by providing services to citizens. Because the Dole office would work better, wouldn't it? Yes, France Travail, this is something that they're taking on board. So with respect to these questions, in your experience, do you have anything that you would like to say?
It's very interesting. It's not the first time that there are productivity gains on white collars. Like, for example, remember Excel made the accountants much more efficient than before, and there are many more accountants, maybe not so massively than generative AI. Well, still, to be able to manage everything in a table was great. But what I find very interesting is that all the pile of talents are collapsing. The collapse of the talent staff, as the Americans call it, is that one person can do a lot without being extremely competent in all the topics. So that means that teams that would before could have 8 or 10 people, and even before 100 people, they can be teams of 1, 2, 3 people. And that means that we will give more power to the persons. And there's an American economist, David Ota, who said that it would create a new middle class because we will be able to have jobs that for which you need to be extremely qualified, like a doctor or a lawyer, that will be practiced by people who will be just a little bit less qualified, like a nurse, a paralegal, and will have the same impact because they will be supported by AI, while they still know when AI is not right. So this is something that is very fundamental here because it is going to change completely the social relations. So it could stop this polarizing trend that we have in France at the moment. I don't think it will reduce inequalities, but it will transform them. They will still be the ones who don't want to adopt technology, and they might be lagging behind. And those who will have adopted the technology from wherever they come from, they will be able to be leaders of the economy of tomorrow. But the question is really, how do we make this cultural shift of our societies to be sure that the largest number of people can take the right turn of AI? Maybe 3 points very quickly to complement what you said. The first one is it is absolutely fundamental. We shouldn't wonder if we should deploy generative AI tools or not. It will be integrated in all the tools that we'll have. And we'll have the tools with AI anyway. And the question wasn't asked about when we had our first laptops or any bureautics tools. It's a tool to attract talents. It's a tool to deliver well-being in the workplace. And the second point is we have to measure this productivity, because the major difference from now and before is we're not looking at IT technology that is in CapEx, but it's OpEx. So, of course, for companies, and we already see it in the US, this is a huge increase on IT costs. So we'll have to use something in front. Either we'll have to increase the results or increase the revenue or the productivity. So we'll have to measure and find out what will be the consumption. What I do research on Google, it's free. If I do a prompt, it's not free. So the companies will have to have the capacity to measure that. Third point, and this is quite something interesting to discuss here, because we talk a lot about AI, but we don't do enough AI. We don't use it enough. In the company where I work, we realized that there were 130 or 150 pucks everywhere. But when you're looking at something that has to be scaled up and that has to have a real impact on the employees or on the business, finally we realized that there aren't enough of those. So we need to move on to concrete actions. It's time to wrap up. We haven't talked about the AI Act. Do you have an opinion on the AI Act? In the report, we didn't want to mention it because we wanted to focus on France. Do you have an opinion on the regulations, good or bad? Are there things that you would have liked to see improved in this AI Act? You each have 20 seconds, 30 seconds, not even, because we have 1 minute, 43 seconds left. So if somebody wants to say something about it. Well, I wanted to say, to give two very precise cases. When we talk about reducing inequalities and promoting well-being, I'm going to give you two examples. You go into a company, you join a company, you don't know the rules of the company, and tomorrow a lot of companies are starting to do that. You have someone who walks with you in your first steps in the company. So that's a good example for beneficial. Everything that could be also knowledge sharing. Somebody who's been in the house for 25 years, he knows all the processes. So you have this logic of shared basis of knowledge, and you reduce inequalities and you promote well-being. So there's less. It's less handicap not to have experience in the company. A few words. 50 seconds. So one point that was not mentioned enough, maybe, is AI without data doesn't work. Yeah, that's why we need the data, and that's why we need the authorizations to get the data. So before we thought that we had time, but in the companies world, a lot of companies don't have the capacity today to activate all these major theoretical principles. because they don't know how to do it. And there's a huge work that to be done, the structuring of the data model before we can benefit from AI. So, well, we won't have to go into that, Charles, but to have a debate on that. But it's a good thing to remind it is we have time, but we have to get going. Thank you. I think we're at 0 time left, so we have to break here. Thank you.
Optimisme.